The digital clock on the diner's coffee machine blinked 7:14 p.m. It was an angry red, the color of a fresh wound against the greasy stainless steel. Outside, the neon sign, a buzzing, flickering thing shaped like a milkshake glass, cast a sickly pink glow onto the wet pavement. Inside, the clatter of forks on ceramic and the low hum of conversation provided a fragile shield against the sounds from the sidewalk. Elias Vance heard them anyway. He heard his daughter's cry, a thin, sharp sound that sliced through the murmur of the diner and twisted in his gut. He pushed away his half-eaten burger, the grease suddenly nauseating. Through the plate glass window under the sputtering pink light, he saw her. 7-year-old Lily, her small shoulders shaking, her face buried in her hands. Towering over her were 3 young men, their laughter loud and sharp-edged. The leader, Marcus Thorne, held a phone, its screen a bright rectangle filming her distress. He leaned in close, his voice a cruel imitation of a whisper, loud enough for Elias to read his lips. "What's that in your ear, little mouse? Can't hear me?" He reached out and flicked the small, beige hearing aid tucked behind her ear. Lily flinched, a sob catching in her throat. Her world, a carefully balanced construction of amplified sound, had just been violated. Elias was moving before he thought. The diner door swung open with a jingle of a small bell, a ridiculously cheerful sound for the rage coiling in his chest. "Hey!" His voice was rougher than he intended. "Leave her alone." Marcus Thorne turned, his expression one of pure, unadulterated entitlement. His friends snickered, shifting their weight like hyenas backing their alpha. "Or what?" Marcus said, his phone still pointed at Lily, now panning to capture her father's arrival. "You gonna do something, old man?" Elias was not an old man. He was 34, but the 2 jobs and the constant worry had carved lines into his face that made him look older. He put himself between them and his daughter, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Just back off. We don't want any trouble." "Too late," Marcus sneered. "Trouble's fun." He took a step forward, crowding Elias, who stood his ground. The air smelled of rain, exhaust fumes, and the cheap cologne Marcus wore. Down the street, parked under a flickering streetlight, was Sheriff Brody's patrol car. A familiar silhouette sat inside, motionless. The law was 50 yards away, and it was looking the other way. Elias felt a cold dread seep into his bones, colder than the damp night air. In the distance, so faint it might have been the blood pounding in his own ears, he thought he heard the low, rhythmic rumble of a faraway engine, a sound like approaching thunder on a clear night. The door to the sheriff's office closed with a heavy, final thud. The sound echoed the closing of a door in Elias's mind, the one marked, Hope. Sheriff Brody leaned back in his creaking chair, the worn leather groaning in protest. He steepled his fingers, a gesture that was meant to look thoughtful but came across as pure dismissal. "Elias," he began, his voice laced with a weary paternalism that set Elias's teeth on edge. "Boys will be boys. Marcus Thorne is young, got a little too much time on his hands. He humiliated my daughter," Elias said, his voice low and tight. He held his own phone, the screen showing the video Marcus had already posted. The title was cruel, "Little Robot Girl Cries." The comments underneath were a cesspool. "He filmed it. He put it on the internet. This isn't just being a boy, Sheriff. This is cruelty." Brody sighed, a long, theatrical exhalation. He didn't look at the phone. "Look, I know Councilman Thorne. He's a good man. His boy is just high-spirited. You go making a big deal out of this, filing reports, it's just going to make things harder on you." On the girl, it wasn't advice. It was a threat, wrapped in the guise of friendly concern. The system wasn't just failing. It was telling him to accept the abuse, to swallow the injustice, to teach his daughter that her pain didn't matter. "So you're not going to do anything?" Elias asked the question flat, devoid of the outrage he felt. The outrage was a luxury he couldn't afford to show in this office. "There's nothing to be done," Brody said, turning his gaze to some paperwork on his desk, a clear signal that the conversation was over. It's a spat on a sidewalk. Let it go. Tell your girl to grow a thicker skin. Elias stood there for a moment, the silence in the room thick with unspoken truths. He saw the framed photo on Brody's desk. The sheriff shaking hands with Councilman Thorne at a charity golf tournament. He saw the comfortable complacency in the sheriff's posture. He was a gatekeeper, and the gate was firmly shut. Elias turned and walked out, the jingle of the bell on the office door sounding like a death knell. He stepped back into the evening air, feeling more isolated than he had ever felt in his life. The town felt smaller, the walls closing in. He was a father, tasked with protecting his child, and the one institution designed to help him had just told him he was on his own. The world had told him that his daughter's dignity was worth less than a powerful man's convenience. Their apartment was small, 2 rooms above a quiet bakery. It smelled of yeast and sugar in the mornings and old books and floor polish in the evenings. It was a clean, orderly space, a fortress of love Elias had built for his daughter after his wife, Sarah, had been taken by a sudden illness 3 years prior. Sarah's photograph was on the mantel, her smile a constant, gentle presence. Everything in the apartment was a testament to their quiet life. Lily's drawings, vibrant explosions of color, were held to the refrigerator by mismatched magnets. Her worn copy of The Velveteen Rabbit sat on the nightstand beside her bed. Next to the book, charging in its small white case, was the hearing aid. It was a marvel of technology, a tiny, flesh-colored device that cost more than their car. Elias had worked 60-hour weeks for 6 months, taking every overtime shift at the garage to afford it. It was her bridge to the world, the device that allowed her to hear the soft melody of the ice cream truck, the whisper of the wind in the leaves, the 3 words he told her every night before she fell asleep. "I love you." He would watch her. Sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, her brow furrowed in concentration as she navigated a world of sound that he took for granted. She was resilient, more so than any adult he knew. She had faced her challenges with a quiet courage that humbled him daily. Tonight, that courage was gone, replaced by a fragile, trembling fear. She sat on her bed, her small legs tucked beneath her, refusing to look at him. She had taken the hearing aid out the moment they got home, placing it on the charger with an air of finality, as if she were discarding a part of herself she no longer wanted. She was retreating into silence, a world where cruel words couldn't reach her. The video had spread through her school. A text from another parent, dripping with false sympathy, had confirmed it. Lily was now Robot Girl. The cruelty of children, amplified by the cruelty of one entitled adult, had found its mark. Elias sat on the edge of her bed, his large, grease-stained mechanic's hands feeling clumsy and useless. He wanted to promise her that he would fix it, that he would make the monsters go away, but the meeting with Sheriff Brody had stolen that promise from his throat. He could fix a faulty transmission, he could rebuild an engine from spare parts, but he didn't know how to fix a broken system. He didn't know how to repair his daughter's broken heart. The days that followed bled into a gray landscape of fear. The world, once a place of simple routines, became a minefield. A walk to the park was fraught with tension. A trip to the grocery store felt like running a gauntlet. Marcus Thorne and his friends were a constant, menacing presence. They didn't always do something. Sometimes they would just be there, parked across the street in Thorne's expensive sedan, its engine rumbling, their eyes following Elias and Lily's every move. The threat was in the watching, in the knowledge that they could do something at any moment. One morning, Elias came out to find the tires on his old Ford pickup slashed, all 4 of them sitting flat on the asphalt. The sight sent a cold spike of fear through him. This was an escalation, a move from digital torment to physical violation. He called the sheriff's department. The desk sergeant took the report with an air of profound boredom, his pen scratching slowly across the form. Elias knew, with a certainty that made him sick, that the piece of paper would end up in a trash can before the end of the day. He bought 4 used tires he couldn't afford and spent the afternoon changing them himself, his knuckles raw, his mind racing. Lily grew quieter. She stopped drawing. Her vibrant pictures of suns and flowers were replaced by blank sheets of paper. She feigned stomachaches to avoid school. When she was home, she kept the curtains drawn, living in a self-imposed twilight. The hearing aid spent more and more time in its charging case. She was choosing silence, building walls. Elias felt a desperate, clawing helplessness. He was watching his daughter fade, her light dimming with each passing day. He looked in the mirror and saw the face of a failure, a father who couldn't protect his own child from the casual malice of the world. The system had failed him, the community was silent, and he was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The evidence of his persecution was everywhere. The video, the flat tires, the hollows under his daughter's eyes, and yet, it was invisible to those who were supposed to see. The garage was Elias's sanctuary. The smell of oil, the heft of a wrench in his hand, the logical, solvable problems of an internal combustion engine. It was a world that made sense. On a Thursday afternoon, a week after his tires were slashed, a motorcycle rolled into his bay. It was a large, black Harley-Davidson, its engine a low, contented rumble. The man who dismounted was as imposing as his machine. He was older, in his 60s, with a graying beard and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore a simple, clean leather vest over a plain black shirt. On the back of the vest was a patch, a stylized shield cradling a single watchful eye. Underneath, in stark white letters, it read, "The Sentinel's MC." This was Forge. Forge was a man of few words. He'd been bringing his bike to Elias for tune-ups for 2 years. Their interactions were always brief, professional, and built on a foundation of mutual respect. Forge appreciated Elias's honest work, and Elias respected Forge's quiet dignity. Today, however, Forge didn't just point out the engine tick he wanted looked at. He stood by the workbench, watching Elias, his gaze steady and unervingly perceptive. "You look like hell, son," Forge said, his voice a low gravel. Elias didn't look up from the carburetor he was cleaning. "Long week. It's been a long month from the looks of it," Forge countered. He waited. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant clang of metal on metal from another bay. Finally, Elias put down his tools. The tremor in his hands was back. He couldn't hide it. With a ragged sigh, he leaned against the workbench, the fight going out of him. "It's my daughter," he said, the words coming out in a rush. He told Forge everything. He told him about the diner, the video, the mockery of Lily's hearing aid. He told him about Sheriff Brody's dismissal, the slashed tires, the lost report. He told him about the light fading from his little girl's eyes. When he was done, he pulled out his phone and played the video. The small tinny speakers filled the garage with the sound of Lily's crying and Marcus Thorne's jeering laughter. Forge watched the screen, his expression unreadable. But Elias saw something shift in his eyes. A flicker of cold, controlled fury. He looked from the video on the phone to the patch on his own vest. The shield and the watchful eye. It wasn't just a club logo. It was a promise. The Sentinels were not a gang. They were a registered nonprofit, a brotherhood of military veterans, first responders, and tradesmen bound by a strict code of conduct. A code that had been forged in places where order had broken down and the innocent were left unprotected. Forge looked at Elias, his eyes locking onto his. "Some lines don't get crossed," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "A line was crossed here. A child is not a target for sport. We have a code for this." He placed a heavy, calloused hand on Elias's shoulder. "You're not alone anymore, son. We handle this now." The words were simple, but they were the first glimmer of hope Elias had felt in weeks. The quiet rage of one good man had just triggered the disciplined response of many. The time was 8 p.m. Forge stood in his own garage, the door closed, his Harley gleaming under a single bare bulb. He made one phone call. His voice was calm, clipped, conveying only the necessary facts. "Call the tree. Code shield wall. Target is a child. Rendezvous at the old mill, 2100 hours. This is a level 1 mobilization. Dress uniform. Silent arrival." He hung up. Within seconds, a chain reaction began, a silent digital cascade. A text message, containing only a set of GPS coordinates and a timestamp, rippled outwards. In a high-rise office building downtown, a corporate lawyer in a $1,000 suit was finalizing a merger. His phone buzzed. He read the text, his expression hardening. He excused himself from the boardroom, walked to his private office, and opened a locked closet. Inside, hanging next to his tailored suits, was a clean, pressed leather vest. Miles away, a high school history teacher was grading papers at his kitchen table. The same text lit up his phone. He sighed, placed a bookmark in a student's essay on civil responsibility, and walked to his garage. He pulled the cover off a vintage Indian motorcycle, its chrome catching the dim light. Across 3 counties, the scene repeated itself. A paramedic finishing a 24-hour shift. A welder on a construction site, his face illuminated by the blue-white glare of his torch. A software engineer, a baker, a librarian. Men from every walk of life, bound by a shared past of service and a common code. They were fathers, grandfathers, uncles. The nature of the call, code, shield wall, resonated deep within them. It was the most sacred of their duties, to stand between a vulnerable child and a threat. Meanwhile, a different kind of message was sent. An anonymous, encrypted email landed in the inbox of Sarah Jenkins, an investigative reporter for the local paper known for her tenacity and her distrust of the town's cozy power structures. The email was brief. North Avenue Diner, 9 p.m. A story about accountability. Bring a camera. You'll know it when you see it. The numbers grew. At 8:25 p.m., 12 engines fired up in scattered locations. By 8:45 p.m., the count was 37. From highways and country backroads, they began to converge on the rendezvous point. They rode not in a chaotic pack, but with the disciplined spacing of a military convoy. They were a silent, rolling tide of purpose. At the old mill they assembled. Headlights cut through the darkness. The low rumble of nearly 100 V-twin engines vibrated in the air. Forge stood before them, his face grim. He gave no rousing speech. He simply said, "We are here to bear witness. We are here to be a shield. We do not threaten. We do not intimidate. We stand. We let the truth be seen. Let's ride." The mobilization was complete. It was not a mob. It was an instrument of lawful, public accountability, and it was pointed directly at the heart of the town's comfortable silence. The neon sign of the North Avenue Diner hummed its electric song at precisely 9 p.m. Marcus Thorne was holding court again, his laughter bouncing off the glass. He and his friends had cornered a teenage couple in the parking lot, their swagger fueled by a sense of untouchable power. The town square was quiet, wrapped in the sleepy indifference of a weeknight. Then came the sound. It started as a whisper, a low vibration felt more than heard. It grew steadily, not into a roar, but into a deep, resonant thunder that seemed to come from the earth itself. Heads began to turn. The patrons inside the diner moved towards the windows, their curiosity piqued. The first set of headlights appeared, turning the corner onto the main street. Then another and another. They came in perfect, disciplined pairs, a silent river of chrome and black leather. They were the Sentinels. They filled the street, their engines synchronized to a low, powerful idle. There was no revving, no chaotic noise. It was the sound of immense, controlled power. They moved with a slow, deliberate grace, parting around the town's central fountain before lining the entire perimeter of the square. One by one, they cut their engines. The sudden, profound silence that followed was more intimidating than the thunder had been. Over 100 men dismounted in unison. They parked their bikes in flawless rows, creating a formidable, silent barrier. They wore their club vests, the shield and eye emblem repeated again and again 100 times over. They formed a semicircle around the diner's entrance, their arms crossed, their expressions neutral. They did not speak. They did not move. They simply stood, a wall of silent witnesses. Marcus Thorne's laughter had died in his throat. His friends shifted nervously, their bravado evaporating in the face of this calm, disciplined presence. The entire town square had fallen utterly still. Every window was filled with a face. Sarah Jenkins, the reporter, was already there, her camera rolling, capturing the stunned expression on Thorne's face, the quiet power of the men surrounding him. Sheriff Brody's patrol car squealed to a halt at the edge of the square, his face a mask of disbelief and panic. The public confrontation had begun, not with a shout, but with an overwhelming, undeniable presence. Forge took 3 measured steps forward, into the space between his men and the diner. He didn't look at Marcus Thorne. That would have given the boy a status he hadn't earned. He didn't look at Sheriff Brody, who was now cautiously approaching, his hand near his sidearm. Instead, Forge addressed the silent, watching town. His voice was not loud, but it carried in the stillness, amplified by a small, portable speaker one of his men had placed on the ground. "My name is John Miller," he said, using his given name, stripping away the road name to present himself as a citizen. "We are the Sentinels. We are veterans and we are fathers. We are here tonight because a child in this community was harmed, and her pleas for help were ignored." He raised his phone. The audio, now crisp and clear through the speaker, filled the square. It was the sound from the video. Lily's thin, heartbroken sobs, and beneath them, Marcus Thorne's cruel, mocking voice. "What's that in your ear, little mouse?" The sound of a child's pain, broadcast for all to hear, was devastating. A wave of shame and anger rippled through the crowd of onlookers. Phones began to emerge from pockets, dozens of them, all streaming, all recording. The circle of witnesses was expanding second by second. Elias Vance stepped through the line of bikers, Lily holding his hand. She was no longer hiding. Shielded by the silent men, she looked out at the crowd, her expression not of fear, but of quiet validation. She was being seen. Her pain was being acknowledged. The woman who ran the bakery beneath their apartment stepped forward. "I saw it," she said to Sarah Jenkins' camera. "He's been tormenting that little girl for weeks." The diner owner came out, nodding. "He's a menace. His father protects him." The dam of silence had broken. Testimonies flowed, a torrent of ignored complaints and suppressed frustrations. Sheriff Brody finally found his voice, sputtering with impotent rage. "This is an unlawful assembly. Disperse immediately." Forge turned to him, his gaze as cold and hard as steel. He held up a thick manila folder. "This is a lawful assembly, Sheriff. And this is documentation." He began to read, his voice steady and clear. "Complaint number 743, filed by Mrs. Eleanor Gable. Vandalism to her storefront. Suspect identified as Marcus Thorne. Dismissed. Complaint 751, filed by Mr. David Chun. Harassment. Dismissed. Complaint 782, filed by Elias Vance. Property damage. Report lost." He went on, listing dates, names, and case numbers. 47 separate complaints, all filed against Marcus Thorne over 2 years. All vanished into bureaucratic ether. He handed the folder to Sarah Jenkins, whose camera zoomed in on the official documents. The evidence was irrefutable, broadcast live for the entire world to see. The mask of systemic apathy had been ripped away, revealing the deliberate corruption beneath. The flashing lights of Sheriff Brody's car painted the scene in frantic strokes of red and blue, a stark contrast to the disciplined stillness of the bikers. With the evidence laid bare and broadcast across dozens of live streams, Brody was trapped. His authority, built on backroom deals and intimidation, crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny. He looked from the stoic face of Forge to the lens of Sarah Jenkins' camera, and then to the faces of his own constituents, their expressions a mixture of anger and disgust. His career was evaporating in real time. A black sedan screeched to a halt behind the patrol car. Councilman Thorne emerged, his face a thundercloud of arrogant fury. "What is the meaning of this?" he boomed, striding towards Brody. "Get these thugs out of here and arrest whoever is responsible for this circus." Forge met the councilman's gaze. "Your son is responsible," he said, his voice cutting through the man's bluster. "And the sheriff here is responsible for allowing it to continue." For the first time, Councilman Thorne seemed to notice the sheer number of people, the cameras, the cold, unified anger. His power, which thrived in shadows and whispers, was useless in this bright, public light. He turned to his son, who was now pale and trembling, the entitled sneer replaced by raw fear. There was no escape. With a final, defeated glance at the cameras, Sheriff Brody walked over to Marcus Thorne, pulled out a pair of handcuffs, and recited the Miranda rights in a mumbled, humiliated tone. The click of the cuffs was a sharp, definitive sound in the quiet square. The Sentinels did not cheer. They did not gloat. Their mission was not about revenge. It was about accountability. As Marcus was placed in the back of the patrol car, they remained silent, a testament to their discipline. Their presence had been a catalyst, creating a space where the truth could be heard and justice could be served. Once the patrol car, carrying both a disgraced scion and a compromised sheriff, pulled away, Forge gave a single, sharp nod. As one, the 100 men turned, walked to their motorcycles and mounted. The engines came to life in a synchronized, thunderous roar, a final, powerful statement. Then, in the same orderly, 2x2 formation in which they had arrived, they rode out of the town square, leaving behind a community awakened from its slumber. Elias stood with Lily, no longer isolated, as neighbors and friends surrounded them, their hands on his shoulder, their words offering the support that had been absent for so long. Lily's dignity, and the town's, was on the path to being restored. The events of that night sent shockwaves far beyond the town square. Sarah Jenkins' story, complete with video evidence and the documented complaints, was picked up by national news outlets. The narrative was compelling. A community's silent suffering, a father's desperate love, and the disciplined intervention of an unlikely group of protectors. The story of the Sentinel Shield went viral. An internal affairs investigation was launched, and within a month, Sheriff Brody was suspended pending a full inquiry into corruption and dereliction of duty. Councilman Thorne, facing a recall petition signed by thousands of his constituents and a public relations nightmare, announced he would not seek re-election. The system, so long stagnant and corrupt, had been violently shaken into a state of reform. The Sentinels, thrust into the national spotlight, handled their newfound fame with the same discipline they had shown at the diner. They established a national nonprofit organization, the Sentinel Shield Program, dedicated to providing support and advocacy for bullied children and their families. Chapters were established across the country, creating a network of watchful eyes and strong shoulders for the vulnerable. Donations poured in, funding legal aid, counseling services, and community outreach. In Elias's town, the first major project was the construction of a new youth center, built on a vacant lot where bored teenagers used to congregate. It was a place of light and activity, a testament to the community's renewed commitment to its children. 6 months later, the autumn sun cast long shadows across a new playground. Lily Vance, her laughter bright and clear, flew high on a swing, her hair trailing behind her like a banner. She wore her hearing aid without a trace of shame. It was simply a part of her, like the color of her eyes. Elias pushed her, his heart full. The fear was gone, replaced by a deep, abiding sense of peace. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was part of a community that had found its voice. He looked up and saw it across the street. A single, black Harley-Davidson was parked under an old oak tree. The rider, a sentinel he didn't recognize, sat quietly, just watching. He wasn't there to intimidate or interfere, merely to be a presence, a quiet promise that this child, and all children, were under a watchful eye. The rider saw Elias looking, gave a slow, subtle nod of respect, and then, with a low rumble of his engine, he pulled away and disappeared down the road. The shield remained, an enduring symbol of lawful protection and the profound courage of a community united for its own.